The alarm on my wrist screamed at 4 in the morning, and I knew before I even opened my eyes that something above the atmosphere had gone very wrong. I am Daniel Fletcher, and I run a small shop on the edge of Ashfield Station, 3 streets back from the spaceport terminal. Guns, old blades, trade licenses, the paperwork nobody else wants to deal with. That is what I do. I am not a soldier, I am not a diplomat. So when the priority signal from the station council lit up every screen in my bedroom at once, my first thought was that the alarm system had broken again. It had not broken. I threw on a coat and ran down 3 flights of stairs into a street already full of people staring up at the sky. Above the clouds, cutting a slow circle over the station, hung a warship the size of a small mountain. Its hull was gray and jointed like the shell of some ancient insect, and it moved without a single sound, which somehow made it worse. Sound would have meant engines. Silence meant something we did not understand yet. My comm buzzed. It was Grace Whitfield, the station administrator, and her voice had none of its usual calm. "Daniel, I need you at the council hall right now. Not in an hour. Now." "Grace, I sell rifles to farmers. Why do you need me?" "Because the ship up there is Vexthal, and their commander asked for you by name." I stood in the street with my mouth open, while a woman beside me clutched her child and stared at the sky like it might fall on her. I had heard of the Vexthal. Everyone had. A species with one throne, one army, one voice, and a habit of arriving at other worlds only when they were unhappy. I had sold exactly one item to a Vexthal buyer in my entire career, a single antique dagger, months ago. I did not think that transaction would ever come looking for me again. I was wrong. The council hall was already packed when I arrived, guards standing stiff along the walls, monitors flickering with a live feed from orbit. Grace met me at the door, her face pale under the harsh light. "Their commander is called Korath," she said quietly, walking fast so I had to jog to keep up. "It has been circling for 6 hours, refusing to answer any hail except one condition. It wants to speak with the shop owner, who sold weapons to its enemies. That is you." "I did not sell weapons to anyone's enemies. I sold a dagger to a tourist. Tell that to a warship, Daniel." We stepped into a side chamber where a large screen dominated one wall, already glowing with the shape of a Vexthal face. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, mandibles folded tight in a way that even I could tell meant anger. The translator bead on the table clicked and hissed before finding its rhythm. "You are the merchant," the voice said, flat and enormous, filling the room like water filling a cup. "The one who sells death to whoever pays." "I sell hunting rifles and old knives," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were not steady at all. "I do not sell death to anyone." "Do not lie to me," Korath said. 3 cycles ago, a rebel cell on my home world used a rifle bearing the mark of your world's manufacturers to strike at my sovereign's personal guard. That rifle was traced through 6 hands, and every trail ends at your planet's export registry, and one of the names on that registry is yours. The room went very quiet. Grace looked at me, and I understood then that this was not a misunderstanding that would clear itself up with an apology. Somewhere out there, a weapon with my planet's fingerprints on it had been used against a foreign throne, and the throne wanted someone to answer for it. "I need to see the registry," I said. A junior officer slid a data slate across the table. I scrolled through it with hands that were sweating despite the cold room, and there it was, an export chain running through 4 different colonies before landing in the hands of a rebel group I had never heard of, on a world I had never visited. 3 years after I had sold that same model of rifle to a licensed trader, who swore it was going to a wildlife preserve. "This is not an assassination," I said slowly, reading further. "This was used in a protest that turned into a fight. Your sovereign's guard was not the only side carrying weapons that day." "That does not matter," Korath said. "What matters is that your people armed rebels against their own government." "We did not arm anyone against anyone," I said, my voice finding steadiness for the first time since the alarm had woken me. "We sold a rifle to a licensed buyer, who broke the terms of that license 4 times over, before it reached anyone's hands. That is not the same as choosing a side. That is the buyer choosing a side, 3 owners after the sale." The mandibles on the screen clicked together, sharp and fast, and the translator struggled to keep pace. "Then explain to me," Korath said, and the room seemed to lean in closer. "Why your world sells weapons to everyone. Your government, your colonies, your rivals, species who have fought against you within living memory. I have studied your trade records for 6 hours while circling this station, and I find no pattern, no loyalty, no single side you have chosen. You arm the world and you arm its enemy in the same season. Does this not frighten you? Does this not endanger you?" I looked at Grace. She gave me a small nod, the kind that says I have nothing better, so it is yours now. I took a slow breath, because whatever I said next was going to decide whether that ship stayed in orbit as a threat or left as something else entirely. Can I speak plainly? I said, without you taking it as an excuse. Speak, Korath said. You keep calling it a pattern you cannot find. There is a pattern. It is just not the one you are looking for. On my world, a long time ago, before we ever left this atmosphere, we fought a war over exactly this question. Whether all the weapons should belong to one throne, one army, one voice that decides everything for everyone else, or whether every person should be allowed to hold enough strength to say no when that throne goes too far. The side that believed in spreading the strength around won that war. It was not a clean win. It cost us more than I can explain in one conversation. But it settled something in us that never came unsettled again. That sounds like chaos, Korath said. It sounds like chaos to you because your world has one hand holding every weapon, I said. On my world, no one gets to be the only one holding a gun in the room. Not our leaders, not our biggest companies, not even people I personally dislike. Because the moment one group holds all the strength and everyone else holds none, that group stops needing to ask permission for anything. History on my world is full of thrones that stopped asking permission the day they realized no one could stop them. We decided, at a terrible price, that we would rather live in a noisy room full of people who can all defend themselves than a quiet room where one person decides who gets to keep breathing. The screen was silent for a long moment. Somewhere behind Korath, other shapes moved, other Vexthal officers watching this exchange, and I wondered how many of them had ever heard a human explain this out loud. You say this keeps you safe, Korath finally said. Yet you admit your weapons end up in the hands of rebels who fight their own governments. That is not safety. That is fuel poured on every fire that already exists. It is not fuel, I said. It is a mirror. If a government is stable, if it treats its people fairly, a rifle in a farmer's hands changes nothing, because that farmer has no reason to use it against his own leaders. But if a government has already failed its people so badly that rebellion looks better than obedience, that failure existed long before any rifle arrived, we did not create that fire. We simply refused to make sure only one side of it could ever fight back. You speak as if trade decides nothing, Korath said, sharper now. Yet here I am, above your station, because a rifle from your world reached hands that used it against my sovereign. And I am standing here answering for it, I said, because that is what happens when a trade goes wrong. I am not hiding from that. I broke no law, but a buyer under my license broke several, and I will help you trace every hand that touched that weapon after it left my shop, because that is fair, and because I do not believe in walking away from a mess my paperwork was even loosely connected to. But do not mistake my honesty for guilt over the whole system. The system is not broken because a weapon reached the wrong hands once. It would be broken if it only ever reached the right ones, because right and wrong depend entirely on which side is currently winning. Grace shifted beside me, and I saw a flicker of something on her face that might have been worry that I had gone too far. Korath's 4 eyes narrowed, the mandibles going still. Your world sold weapons to my sovereign's own guard as well, Korath said slowly, like the thought was only now settling into place. Did it not? It did, I said. Same year, different license, different buyer. Your sovereign's guard bought defense equipment from the very same export registry that eventually, through several unlawful hands, armed the rebels who struck at them. We did not choose your sovereign's side. We did not choose the rebels' side either. We sold to whoever came with a legal license and the ability to pay, and we let the outcome of that conflict be decided by the people actually living it, not by a shop owner 3 systems away deciding who deserved to win. That is a dangerous kind of neutrality, Korath said. It is the only honest kind, I said, because the moment we start deciding who deserves weapons and who does not, we stop being traitors and start being kings. And kings are exactly the problem we walked away from, generations ago, at a cost none of us ever wants to pay again. For a long stretch, nobody in that room spoke. The warship above us did not move, did not fire, did not do anything except sit there in silence, while its commander turned over an idea that had clearly never been offered to it in quite that shape before. On my world, Korath said finally, and the anger in the voice had thinned into something closer to curiosity. Every citizen surrenders their blade at the age of majority, as a mark of trust in the throne. We are taught that trust is a gift given upward, from the people to the sovereign, and that the sovereign repays it with protection. And who protects the people? I asked, on the day the sovereign decides that trust no longer needs to be repaid. The silence that followed was longer than any before it. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, and somewhere behind me, Grace had gone completely still. "That question is not permitted on my world," Korath said quietly. "I know," I said. "That is exactly why I am standing in a shop 3 streets from a spaceport, selling rifles and old knives to farmers and traders and colonies who cannot stand each other, instead of standing in front of one throne asking permission to exist. It is not a perfect system. We have paid for its mistakes more than once, and we will pay for them again. But it is a system where no single failure can ever become permanent, because there is always someone left standing who can say no." Korath's mandibles clicked, slow this time, almost thoughtful. "I came here to demand punishment," it said. "I expected excuses, or fear, or a merchant begging for his life while his world's leaders scrambled to appease me. I did not expect a shop owner to hand me the one question my own people are forbidden to ask out loud." "I am not trying to insult your world," I said. "I am trying to explain mine, because you asked. And because pretending we do not understand the danger in what we do would be a lie, and I do not think either of us has time for lies today." The screen flickered, and for a moment I thought the connection had failed, but it steadied, and Korath's 4 eyes settled on me with something that was no longer hostility. "I will take the trade records with me," Korath said. "I will trace every hand that touched that rifle after it left your license, as you offered. And I will report to my sovereign that the humans did not arm my enemies out of malice, but out of a belief so old and so strange to us, that it survived a war none of us have ever heard about." "That is fair," I said, and felt something in my chest loosen for the first time since the alarm had gone off. "One more question," Korath said, and the room tensed again, waiting. "If your system allows any group to arm itself against any other, what stops your own world from tearing itself apart from the inside, one small conflict at a time?" I thought about that for a moment, because it deserved a real answer, not a quick one. "Nothing stops it completely," I said. "We still argue. We still disagree, sometimes badly. But when everyone can defend themselves, an argument has to end in a conversation eventually, because neither side can simply erase the other and call it settled. The strength spread out among all of us is not there to start fights. It is there to make sure no fight can ever finish in silence." Korath was quiet again, and this time the quiet did not feel dangerous. It felt like a mind working through something too large to answer in one sitting. "I will leave your orbit within the hour," Korath said at last. "Your world will hear from my sovereign through proper channels regarding trade terms going forward. And you, merchant, will hear from me again, not as an enemy, as someone who wishes to understand a species strange enough to hand its enemies the same weapons it hands its friends, and call that fairness rather than foolishness." The screen went dark, and the room let out a breath it had been holding for 6 hours. Grace turned to me, her face somewhere between relief and disbelief. "You just talked down a warship," she said. "I sold a dagger to a tourist 8 months ago," I said. "That is the only part of this I actually understand." Outside, through the tall windows of the council hall, the warship had already begun to rise, sliding upward through the clouds without a single sound, the same silence that had terrified the whole station 6 hours earlier now feeling, somehow, like the sound of a question being carried away to be asked again somewhere else. I walked home as the sun came up over Ashfield Station, past neighbors still standing in the street staring at an empty sky, and I thought about the rifle that had started all of this, passed hand to hand through 4 colonies before landing somewhere it was never meant to go. I thought about the farmer who had bought it honestly, and the trader who had not, and the rebels who had used it, and the guard who had faced it, all of them holding a piece of the same strength, none of them asking my permission for what they did with it. By the time I unlocked the door to my shop, the morning crowd had already started gathering outside, waiting for me to open like nothing unusual had happened at all. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the latch, looking at the shelves of rifles and old blades inside. Ordinary tools that had somehow, through 6 hands and 3 years and 1 furious commander, become the reason a warship had circled my home for an entire night. Then I opened the door, because that is what I do, and because somewhere out there, on a world where trust only ever moves upward toward a throne, a commander was carrying home a question it had never been allowed to ask before, and I had a feeling that question was not going to stay quiet for long.